Welcome back to Killer Stories. I'm your host, Bobbie Holmes. At the end of today's episode, I will have a trailer for another true crime podcast I think you'll like. I've gotten close with a great group of podcasters, so I plan to add a preview of their shows into each episode. Stay tuned to the end. Today I'm featuring Kira from the podcast Murder and More. Way back in September, I had a story suggestion from a listener in France, Cecile Sauvanet. I feel awful that I didn't see it until recently. I suck at PMs through Facebook. The best way to contact me for story suggestions is to email killerstoriespodcast@gmail.com. But I'm super excited to cover Cecile's story today. I remember watching an episode on Unsolved Mysteries about it, and it totally caught my interest. It's the Dupont de Ligonnes murders. This happened in France, and I don't speak a bit of French, so please don't judge me. If it's not obvious by saying it was on Unsolved Mysteries, this family massacre is still considered a cold case, but there is a definite prime suspect. Let's dive into the Dupont de Ligonnes family. The father, Xavier, which I think is Javier, but I'm American, so I'm going to say Xavier. He came from an old French aristocrat heritage. His father, Bernard Hubert Dupont de Ligonnes, was a count, which is a European title of nobility. So Xavier, his son, was held to high expectations. He graduated with an engineer degree from a school I'm not even going to try and pronounce. In the 80s, Xavier met Agnes. He was in his 20s while she was in her late teens at the time. The two were head over heels for each other. Xavier was an explorer at heart, and even though he had very strong feelings for her, he ended things with Agnes so that he could do some traveling. After a year, he returned to the city of Nantes to find Agnes was pregnant. He decided that he wanted to be with her, despite the fact that she was pregnant with another man's baby. July 7th, 1990, a baby boy was born. They named him Arthur. Xavier adopted Arthur and gave him the Dupont de Ligonnes name. Xavier and Agnes got married after Arthur's second birthday. In August of 1992, Xavier and Agnes had their first biological child, Thomas. 2 years later, they had a daughter named Anne, and in May 1997, they completed their family with another little boy, Benoit. Agnes was very religious. She helped teach catechism classes at their Catholic church. She was described by others as being very strict yet loving mother. Xavier was an entrepreneur who started up many different businesses over the years, most of which involved traveling salesmen and were short-lived. I'm not sure why. I think we all love it when salesmen show up at our doorstep. Obviously, I'm being sarcastic. I actually used to have a sign on my door that said, "No soliciting. We're too broke to buy anything. We know who we're voting for. We have found Jesus. So unless you have Thin Mints or an Amazon package, please go away." And it's the truth. If I'm not expecting a guest or a package, when the doorbell rings, I hit the floor and ignore it until they go away. But Xavier couldn't be seen as a failure, so he still presented himself as a successful businessman to his friends and family. They rented a home in Nantes, France. Their eldest son, Arthur, by the age of 20 had baccalaureate degrees in science, sustainable development, and industrial technology. After finishing his undergrad, he worked at a local pizzeria and continued his education for a technical diploma in IT. Obviously, he was a very smart and driven young man. That is a lot to have accomplished by 20. Thomas was quite introverted compared to his older brother, Arthur, but he was equally smart. He completed a baccalaureate in literature when he was just 17 years old, and he was continuing his education in music at a local Catholic university. Anne was focusing her career path in science. She was 16 years old and in the 11th grade, a very beautiful young girl, and she even did some modeling for commercial retail. Benoit was the youngest of the Dupont de Ligonnes children. At 13, he was busy with school, and on the weekend, he was an altar boy at the church that the family attended. All of the children attended private Catholic schools. I'm not sure if any of you have kids in private school, but it's not cheap, especially not when you have 4 children to pay for. To outsiders, they seem like the perfect family, close-knit. They went on family vacations in the summer. Their home is decorated with framed pictures of smiling faces. It's complete with 2 adorable black lab dogs. Arthur was attending his college about an hour away from Nantes, where his family lived. His boss at the pizzeria said he always came in on the 1st of the month to pick up his paycheck. But on the 1st of April in 2011, he didn't show up. His boss said that Arthur was very responsible and respectful. It seemed out of character for him. April 1st begins the timeline of suspicious events I'm going to walk you through. 2 days later, Xavier, Agnes, and the 3 youngest children spend their Sunday as a family. They went out to the movies and had dinner at a local restaurant. The next day, Monday, April 4th, Anne and Benoit were absent from school. You know how it goes in junior high and high school. It's all about seeing your friends. After school, Anne and Benoit's friends try to call and text them, but there's no response. Kids are usually glued to their cell phones. Their friends became concerned when there were rumors started about the family moving out of town due to a new job opportunity for Xavier. If this was true, how could Anne and Benoit leave without even saying goodbye? Late that evening, Xavier was seen with his son, Thomas, eating at a fancy restaurant in town. The waiter said that by the end of the dinner, Thomas was feeling sick and they went home. It was around this time that the neighbors noticed all the shutters in the house were closed. It seemed very strange because they were literally always open, even if they left the house for an extended period of time, like going on vacation. The next day, Tuesday, April 5th, after school let out, Thomas went to a friend's house to hang out. Typical teenager stuff. Watching TV and playing music together. Xavier called Thomas and said he needed to come home as soon as possible. Agnes had been in a cycling accident. Thomas had planned to stay overnight at his friend's, but instead he took the train back to Nantes. Later, Thomas's friend would text him and ask if everything was okay. At first, there was no response, but eventually a text came through from Thomas and it read, "I'm not coming to yours. I'm ill. Really ill. I'm not coming to class." 2 days later, one final text came through from Thomas. It said, "I'm out of battery. My dad's looking for a new charger for me." An ex-girlfriend of Thomas's said she spoke to him through Facebook on April 5th, but something felt off. It didn't seem like the way he would normally talk. The family home was more like a row house. They had neighbors on either side of them. Their neighbors reported that during this week, or at least between Sunday and Wednesday, the family's black labs were howling at night. But the next night, nothing. No howling, no barking, no noise at all. Wednesday, April 6th, Arthur's girlfriend came by the house because she hadn't heard from him in a few days. There was a light on inside, but no answer at the door, and she reported that it was strange she didn't hear the dogs barking when she knocked. Friday, April 8th. Xavier hops online. He writes an email to his brother-in-law. Quote, "Everything's fine, Bertram. You'll hear more detailed news soon through Christine. Bye for now. All the best, Xavier." Unquote. He logs on to sitecatholic.com and writes on the forum. This was the last known online action in the Dupont de Ligonnes home. The following week, Monday, April 11th, the school where the children attended received letters stating that the family is moving to Australia and they won't be returning. Agnes's work gets a slightly different story. She supposedly sends in a letter of resignation saying she's been suffering from gastroenteritis. Poor Agnes, first she's in a cycling accident and now she has gastroenteritis. It also stated the family moving to Australia for, quote, urgent professional changes, and she would not be returning. Her employer didn't understand why she would just send a letter and not speak with him in person or at least on the phone. He tries to call her, but there's no answer. Another typed letter was sent to the immediate family members informing them of their departure. It said that Xavier had been working for the American DEA. The family is being moved to the United States and put into the witness protection program. Basically cutting ties, saying since they'll be in witness protection, they won't even be able to communicate. How convenient. He asked that they keep their actual reason for leaving on the down low and tell others that they moved to Australia for a new career opportunity. Xavier stayed in a hotel alone in the city of Blagnac in southern France on the night of April 11th. Then he traveled to southeast France and stayed at a different hotel the following night in Les Ponts. This time he used the name Mr. Laurent Xavier. He's using a credit card. This is 2011. He has to know he can easily be tracked with those transactions. But at this point, no one's even looking for him. It wasn't until Wednesday, April 13th, that a neighbor called the police to report her suspicions. She said that the shutters have been closed for over a week. Agnes's car is parked outside but hasn't moved. Police come by for a wellness check, but it doesn't seem as if anyone is home. There's a sign on the door for all mail to be returned to the sender, as if the family is moved. The night of the 13th, Xavier hops to another hotel in La Seine. He lived in this area of southeast France when he was traveling back in the 80s. He called and spoke to an acquaintance from that time, but she reports they didn't meet up, just talked on the phone. Thursday, April 15th, Xavier withdraws cash from an ATM and stays at another hotel in Roquebrune-sur-Argens. The next morning, he leaves his car behind and takes off. He was captured on surveillance from the hotel parking lot. He was walking away carrying a bag and what looked like a rifle. That is the last known sighting of Xavier. After that, he stopped using his credit card and all bank accounts were closed. Still unaware of the situation, the police come back to their home day after day to check things out, but nothing seems overly suspicious. Police thought maybe they just couldn't pay rent and the family took off. But it's strange that Agnes's car was still parked out front. The whole family would not be able to fit in one vehicle. He drove a sedan. That's 6 people and 2 dogs. On Thursday, April 21st, police were once again checking on the home. When walking around back, one of the policemen noticed something under the terrace. They began digging and discovered the bodies of Agnes, Arthur, Anne, and Benoit, and the 2 black labs have been buried there as well. Thomas was found later buried in a separate spot. Investigators believe because he was killed at a later time. To those that favor the theory of Xavier annihilating his family, which is what the evidence points to, it's speculated that Xavier hesitated to kill Thomas because he was his eldest biological son, the one who would carry on the Dupont de Ligonnes name. I think it's possible the evening they dined out together, Xavier may have drugged him then, which is why he was feeling sick, but he couldn't go through with it. The following day, though, he called Thomas back to the house with the lie about Agnes being in an accident and killed him. They had all been shot and wrapped in black plastic before being buried in shallow graves. Each body was buried with either rosary beads or a small Catholic statue, which signifies that whoever did this cared enough to give them their messed up version of a Catholic burial. Autopsy revealed that they all had sleeping pills in their system. An investigation was opened on Xavier Dupont de Ligonnes because, well, his entire family was murdered and he's nowhere to be found. He becomes the prime suspect. In early 2011, Xavier's father passed away. He was devastated and it possibly affected his mental health. He inherited his father's rifle. In February, Xavier got a license to own the firearm. Then in March, he purchased ammo. He was logged into the attendee book at the shooting range on 4 different occasions. He even took his sons with him and was teaching them how to shoot. Xavier asked the shooting instructor questions about a silencer, purchasing one shortly after on March 12th. In late March, Xavier purchased extra-large black trash bags, which in itself isn't weird. He seems to be spreading out his purchases to avoid suspicion. April 4th, he visited 4 different stores to buy 4 bags of lime. Now that we know what we do, these purchases are evidence of premeditated murder. But what was his MO? Why murder your entire family? As I stated earlier, his father had recently died. His grieving could have sent him over the edge. In addition, Xavier was not the successful businessman he presented himself to be. He was actually deep in debt. In the Unsolved Mysteries episode on the case, there was a comment made that the type of man Xavier was, maybe he thought it would be better for his family to be with God than live with a father who is a failure and in such financial debt. I mentioned earlier that the last thing Xavier did online was write on his Catholic forum. Well, back in 2010, on that same forum, he asked for the definition of a sacrifice. Agnes was part of an online medical forum she would post to as well. Way back in 2007, she was sharing personal information about the family. She told them that Xavier once said, quote, "A group death as a family would not be a catastrophe," unquote. So there are signs that point to Xavier at least thinking about the murders years before they happened. But close friends to Xavier don't believe he is the one that murdered his family. One, they don't think he's capable of such a thing. And secondly, he has a really bad back. They find it impossible for him to be the one who dug the graves under the terrace. But if not Xavier, then who? When investigators examined the home, they were confused by the lack of blood present. Not one drop of blood was found. If 5 people and 2 dogs were shot with a rifle, where's the blood? The medical examiner stated that it seemed as if they were asleep when they were shot. But every bed in the house was spotless. So police aren't sure where the murders actually took place. After the discovery of the bodies and the investigation into Xavier, they see his last movements were leaving the hotel parking lot in southeast France. The surrounding terrain includes mountains, caves, and cliffs. It was thought that maybe he walked out into the mountains with his rifle to commit suicide. But the area was searched, including 40 natural caves, thinking he may have crawled inside. But he was never found. Another theory is that Xavier sought out a monastery where they would covertly house him. There was actually a search done at a monastery near where he was last seen, following up on a tip of a possible sighting. But it was just a monk who resembled him and was mistaken for Xavier. Or it's possible he's still on the run. A man named Gerard Corona was an advisor for one of Xavier's startup companies. He was known to create foreign bank accounts, which would allow someone to flee and disappear. Either way, there's an international arrest warrant for Xavier Dupont de Ligonnes, and therefore the family's murders are still considered unsolved. Please continue to send story suggestions to KillerStoriesPodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again to Cecile for requesting this case. Along with the source information, my link tree is listed in the show notes, which has all my social media links as well as the Killer Stories merchandise website. If you follow me on social media, I've been posting pictures of listeners in their Killer Stories swag. My favorite is the premium pullover hoodie. It's so soft. I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as Killer Stories Podcast. My Twitter handle is @KillerStoriesPC. If you're enjoying the podcast and would like to show your support, please visit buymeacoffee.com/killerstories to make a one-time donation. Stay tuned for a trailer from Kira and her true crime podcast, Murder and More. Thanks for listening. Until next time, this has been a killer story.
Hi guys, Kira from Murder and More here. I am the solo host of the True Crime Podcast, where every other Sunday I tell you about a murder, serial killer, or missing person. Murder and More is available to listen to wherever you get your podcasts, including platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, and Stitcher. You can find us on Twitter and Tumblr at Murder and More, Instagram at Murder and More Pod, and Facebook at Murder and More Podcast. Head over to www.murderandmorepodcast.wordpress.com to find out more.